CREA and with Lumina. The events that we are going to host this morning is titled Fostering the Positive Linkages Between Trade and Sustainable Development and Sustainable Development Goals and Global Food Value Chains. This event is inserted into the project, the research project that has been going on for a few years under the leadership of Professor Attila. And the title is Trade for Sustainable Development, as everybody knows. I welcome here all the speakers and the participants who are either in presence in this room or connected or will be connecting shortly. I see some of them on the board. I would like also the representative from CREA to say a few words since we have organized this event.
Yes, good morning everyone. On behalf of the head of the Department of CREA Political and Bioeconomy, I would like to thank Professor Ferri and Lumsa for hosting this workshop on sustainable development goals and global value chain, and special thanks to Attila for coordinating this huge project and ambitious goal. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Before we start, I just would like to say a few words. First of all, this event will be recorded. So for those online, if you do not wish to be recorded, please keep your cameras off. And at the end of each session, we will have some time for question and answer, where you can share your thoughts and ask questions to our speakers. And for those online, also please keep your microphones off, except during the question and answer session. I would also like to inform you of some changes to the program. In the first session, Paola Ungaro and Leopoldo Nascia will speak first, and then Federica Morandi will present. And in the final session, the discussant will now be Łukasz Woźniacki. He's the Senior Trade and Anti-Counterfeit Manager at CropLife Europe, replacing Corrado Finardi as originally indicated in the program. Thank you, Federica and Professor Ferri, for your warm welcome. And now I will leave the floor for Professor Attila from Corvinus University to present the project and its main objectives. And I will share your presentation. And you can just say next slide.
Okay, thank you very much.
Just a moment. Okay, perfect. Okay. Please go ahead, Attila.
Yes, Attila, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Probably you can mute yourself because otherwise, or I don't know, there's an echo behind. Okay, thank you. I hope you can hear me and see the slides as well. So welcome everyone. My name is Attila Jambar. I'm the coordinator of the Trade for SD project. I'm very happy to be here today, although just online. And I would like to present the whole essence of the project, the context, and also some policy relevant results coming from different VPs. Please, next slide. So as you see, our project is about connecting the dots between trade and sustainability. We have been working on this project for 3 years now, so we have one more left. And here you can see the structure of our whole project. What are we doing? So very briefly, we have various different work packages as usual in Horizon types of projects. Our first work package is providing a framework behind trade and sustainability, and we have quite some interesting results coming from the literature review and also from the analysis of the recent market trends on trade. The second package is providing a structured review on how SDGs are currently included in trade rules. So this work package is more about trade policy related issues. VP3 is our modeling package. you will see that we have various interesting results here coming from robust sustainability toolbox and integrating some of the existing models to see how we can have new trade-related results. The fourth web package is about case studies. This is more like a qualitative web package, analyzing the different agri-food value chains in relevant countries with our partners in Asia and Africa. VP 5 and 6 are about policies. Probably many of you would be more interested about the policy-related results of our exercise. VP 5 is more about the coherence of current EU policies in terms of trade and sustainability, and VP6 is more about summarizing our results and writing some policy briefs out of them. Next slide, please. So all in our project, we would like to have an active stakeholder involvement like we do now. We have organized many different events, workshops, live also in Brussels and also in third countries, to have an active involvement of the different stakeholders. This table simply summarizes how we do this by the different work packages. So just in case, just for a few examples, so in terms of our scenario building, we also had a chance to discuss scenarios and results and what type of scenarios we should run with different experts in workshops. We also have, of course, the qualitative work packages more intensive in terms of stakeholder involvement, either in the case of case studies or with the different experiments. We are heavily consulting with local stakeholders to understand the background and see how they would foresee the future of trade and sustainability linkages. And we are currently also running some Q and Delphi exercises in terms of the CAP and also other European policies. Next slide, please. So this is our project in numbers. So as I said, we started in 2021 and we will finish next year summertime. Almost 60 colleagues are working from 10 different countries, 13 participants and lots of deliverables and tasks. We have, if you go to the next slide, you will see that we have different types of consortium members. We have an international organization with FAO on board. We also have third country participants, one from Vietnam and one from Ghana, and have many different institutes, companies, universities working in different parts of Europe together in this big Horizon project. So if you move to the next slide, I will now try to show you some snapshots of our policy relevant results we already have from our VPs. These results are available in our website, so you can have a look on the, if you are more interested on the details of the different deliverables. So first of all, we started with, as we usually do, with a literature review on trade and sustainability linkages. And you may think that it is quite easy to have a review on trade and sustainability linkages. You may think that there are thousands of articles and reports written on this subject, but you will be wrong. It is very, very hard to find articles, reports, which are directly related to trade and sustainability. Many of the articles are analyzing trade, many of the articles are analyzing sustainability, but there's just a few concentrating on the linkages between the two. So actually, after a decent systematic search and with some expert search, we found a little bit more than 200 articles and reports dedicated to this area. And if you see the next slide, one of the most interesting results we found is contrary what we have originally expected, is that the economic dimension prevails. So it's considered to be most important in terms of the articles. So one might think that environmental and social issues are more important these days, but you would be wrong. Most of the articles and reports are concentrating on the economic aspects of trade and sustainability linkages, and then comes social, and then comes environmental in terms of the numbers. This kind of pattern will come up later on as well, as you will see. So it's just coming from the literature now, but you will also see that from other exercises, it seems that the same pattern prevails. If we move to the next slide, you will see some linkages between trade and sustainability. So this figure shows what are the interactions between these two notions, and you will see here that this trade and sustainability is quite context specific. So a kind of a one-size-fits-all approach will never work here. In some of the SDGs, trade have a positive impact, and like in decent work and economic growth, or like in responsible consumption and production. But also there are some negative linkages as well, where trade is against sustainability, like in the case of zero hunger, or like in the case of climate action. So this is kind of a quite complicated and case and context specific issue. Okay, if we move on, we have also analyzed the recent trends in global value chains and how agri-food value chains have been working in previous years, and have identified some interesting, I would say, new trends. First of all, we see that from globalization, we have stepped into the area or a new era of globalization. This is kind of a new buzzword for saying that we see that trade has been increasing, still increasing in terms of numbers, but actually it has much been slowed down than what we have seen in previous decades. GVC, global value chain participation, still increases with trade, but to a much less extent than it previously did. We also see a kind of a shift from global to regional trade patterns, and this also implies a shortening of the global value chains. We also found that agri-food sectors were among the most resilient ones in terms of economic shocks compared to other sectors of the economy, of course with large regional and sectoral differences as usual. And we also analyzed the characteristics and the determinants of GVC participation, and found that market and trade policy-related determinants drive engagement in GVC participation. Okay, let's move on. VP2, as you may remember, is about trade policy and trade agreement-related issues and sustainability. So one of the teams were concentrating on analyzing the effects of environmental provisions in PTAs on SDGs. And what they actually found was, in most of the cases, a negative impact in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. Of course, this is also context specific, but in the majority of the cases, this was a pattern which their gravity model showed us. If we move on, another team was working on the preferential trade agreements and how they are actually included in SDGs. You will hear in a few minutes a presentation about this from Federica, so I wouldn't shoot down the main results here, but just as a flash, you can see that cooperation and local participation are very important in this regard, with training, information, and helping stakeholders to comply with EU requirements. So you will hear a lot more about this in a few minutes. If you also again move on, just skip this slide because this is also about the task I've been talking to. There's another team who have been working on the WTO agreement and how they engage, or what are the rules and how they engage sustainability. And what they found is that WTO agreements primarily emphasize economic growth and partnerships. Again, if you see this pattern comes back, it seems that economic dimension seems to be for some reason more important than the other dimensions, even at the WTO level. Vast majority of the stakeholders they have been consulting with thought that the WTO should be modernized, but most of them also thought that sustainability focus would be an obstacle to further trade liberalization, which is a strange argument, you may think from a trade policy point of view. And of course, they found that harmonization of existing agreements and coherence are of key importance for the future. So again, if we move on, now we can see some results of the modeling team. A certain team were concentrating on the social impacts of trade and sustainability linkages, and they were in that deliverable concentrating on Ghana with a huge data set. And what they found is that with trade liberalization, of course, GDP and GDP per capita would grow, but this kind of growth would distribute very differently between the households by region and also by rural areas. And they also found that the young-led households and the poor would benefit the most from trade liberalization. If we move on, we had a team concentrating on the environmental impacts of sustainability and trade linkages. Yeah, thank you. And they actually showed that, together with the argument that positive GDP impact would come in EU, Vietnam, and EU Ghana trade agreements for the long run, this would also imply a heavy increase in GHG emissions. And what they found is that the trade liberalization increases economic activity even when coupled with carbon tariffs. So their suggestion is that actually a substantial reduction is only possible with CO2 tariffs on all goods and not just on agriculture-related goods, but in all types of goods in order to have a decent impact on this regard. Okay, and if we move on, I would show you some results of our VP4 work package, which is, as you may remember, is more about qualitative issues, so more concentrated on stakeholder involvement and different views from stakeholders. So one of their exercises was to actually ask different citizens all over Europe on how they see the linkages between trade and sustainability. And actually they asked 1,000 people in Germany, in Hungary, and in the UK, and with representative to gender, age, location, and they actually found quite interesting results, as you can see from the next slide. So again, this pattern comes back on economic sustainability. So as you see in the first point, in the post-COVID era and also in the era of the war in Ukraine, major concerns of the European citizens were about economic sustainability, which is quite normal, I think, where policy efforts these things should be focused on. And within the broad area of economic sustainability, citizens' preferences were for reducing poverty and also for securing employment. Probably this is these are the issues which are of their main interest. So policies to reduce food losses are emphasized for developed countries, and decreased inequality for emphasized for the developing world. In terms of social sustainability, they actually ranked the hunger eradication and food security improvement as the most important or biggest issues. And in terms of environment, water quality and water waste were mentioned in particular in terms of sustainability. Okay, if we move on, you will see what are the upcoming tasks which are relevant for policy. So there we have some teams led by Korea, who are heavily working on context-specific case studies on various products in our third countries, Ghana and Vietnam, and also in Tunisia. They would like to better understand the background and how standards, private and public standards, for instance, has an impact on sustainability, and how, in general, different trade agreements and practices affect sustainability. We also have a team who want to understand the behavior factors in farmers' choices. This is led by our UK team. And we have other tasks, as you will see, related to policies. We also try to assess potential political feasibility and acceptance of new policy options. So besides the ongoing policies, we would like to better understand from the stakeholders how they would revise existing policies. And also we would like to have some thoughts on the future of the CAP, which is coming from the trade side. So with this, I would stop here, and thanks very much for your attention. You can, if you are more interested in our results, you can follow our Facebook and LinkedIn, Twitter accounts, and also, of course, our website. Yeah, just as a last final word from my side is that I'm very sorry, but I have to leave after the presentation of Federica. I have another meeting, but I wish you a fruitful discussion for the whole day. Thank you.
Thank you, Attila, for this comprehensive overview of the project. Do you have any questions for Professor Attila? Now we are ready to move on to our first session on SDGs and trade agreement. I'm pleased to introduce Paola Ungaro and Leopoldo Nascia from ISTAT, the Italian Institute for Statistics, and they will be giving us an overview on how Italy is measuring progress towards the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And please, Paola and Leopoldo, the floor is yours. And I will now share your presentation.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for inviting us for this presentation. And just a few words to introduce us. My name is Paola Ungaro. I'm responsible for the project for the collection, analysis and dissemination of statistical measures for monitoring 2030 agenda in Italy. And so today I'm gonna, Leopoldo Nascia is responsible for Goal 9 and Goal 17, and all the other colleagues responsible for the other goals are with us in this presentation. And can we go on, please? Let's start from a kind of scientific or cultural introduction of sustainable development. We can say that the most common definition of sustainable development dates back to 1987, and it is from the final report of the United Nations World Conference on Environment and Development, the Brundtland report, and which defines sustainable development as the development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Since 1987, there has been a very long road by passing through international conferences and working groups and what else over the years, which have further developed issues related to the limits of development and have defined different action plans. We can remember Rio 2020 in 1992 and the Millennium Development Goals of 2000, Rio +20, and then in 2015 the 2030 Agenda, which was It is an action plan by United Nations for people, planet, and prosperity to achieve a sustainable transformation of society, of the economy, and of environment by 2030. It was adopted by UN General Assembly in 2015 and signed by 193 countries. And it is concentrated on the so-called 5 Ps: people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership. Next, please. The Sustainable Development Goals refer to different development domains related to environmental, social, and economic issues, with the complementary dimension of institutional support to for the implementation of the agenda. The SDGs reflect interconnection between human and environmental systems within an integrated global perspective, which requires many synergies between different actors, institutions, including international cooperation in political context, citizenship, and enterprises, and so on. The 17 sustainable goals are articulated in 169 targets. Thank you. Okay, these are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And since 2016, I want to talk about today our mission in ISTAT for this important global project, which is strictly related to the activity, of course, of UN. In 2016, UN Interagency and Expert Group on Sustainable Development Goals, UNEIG SDGs, since 2016 has been working to develop and implement the Global Indicators Framework for the goals and targets. And the first official list of statistical indicators was disseminated in 2017. UNEIG SDGs provides methodologies and regularly review methodological developments and issues related to the indicators and the metadata. In March 2023, the list was composed by about 250 indicators, differently divided in tier levels. Most of indicators were in tier 1 level, which defines indicator conceptually clear, with an international established methodology and standards, and with the data regularly produced by countries for at least 50% of countries. But 77 indicators were still in tier 2nd level, which is the same, but with no regular production by countries. And then there were 6 multiple tier indicators. The United Nations Statistical Division entrusted ISTAT, like other national statistical offices, with the task of coordinating the production of the indicators for measuring sustainable development and monitoring its targets. So ISTAT and SISTAN, which is the National Statistical System, play a crucial role in statistical indicators production to satisfy the global and national information demand. ISTAT plays an important role in supporting methodological and technical aspects, so as coordinator of SISTAN institutions and for study and experimentation of alternative data sources on SDGs. Since December 2016, ISTAT has made available with half-yearly updates the SDG statistical measures for Italy, produced within and in cooperation with SISTAN. In July 2024, we disseminated the 7th edition of the SDGs report, which presents, as the other editions, statistics and analysis at the national, regional and sub-regional level. And we produce also the English version of the reports. You can find all these on our website. And to show you the important work that has been done by ISTAT, we started in December 2016 with the production of 95 statistical measures for about 70, less than 70 indicators. And now we arrived in July 2024, this year, to our 14th edition with the dissemination of 373 statistical measures, of which 342 are unique, which means they're not repeated for different goals, for 139 UNEAG indicators. I'm speaking about statistical measures and indicator because in the effort to integrate a global perspective with country-specific needs, we produce not only identical measures, identical to UNEAG indicators which are requested at the global level, 113 identical measures, 133 similar or partial measures, but also 130 national context measures, which are really directed to focus on our country. The breakdown between identical measures and similar partial or national context measures, of course, is different by goals, as you can see in the graph. And since August 2021, we have a new dissemination system on our website where you can find, as I told you, the report and the file Excels with data 2 times a year, but also a database query system, a dashboard, which allows to browse SDG statistical measures with the option to display and download tables and charts. And about partnership and cooperation, let me say we have a very strong network with institutions other than ISTAT in and out of a Italian statistical system. We work directly or indirectly with other institutions for the production of 180 SDGs measures, which are a very high proportion. And in ISTAT, 100 people in 6 divisions work for the production of the measures. And let us now see some trends from the last report. Let's start with time evolution of goals. We divided the statistical measures presenting improving and the statistical measure deteriorating, and comparing to time periods comparing to the previous year or 10 years before. As you can see from the much crowded, let me say, left part of the graph, the picture is varied but overall positive, especially compared to long-term variation, which see almost in total 60% of measures improving and only less than a fifth worsening. And something about the goals. In long term, the percent of measures with the positive change is particularly high for gender equality goal 5, in which the trends in violence against women and presence of women in management positions are improving. In Goal 7, energy, thanks to the progress of all the measures on energy consumption and renewable sources. And in Goal 8, work and economic growth, for a generalized recovery of the labor market and the positive trend in material consumption, of course, especially compared to the COVID period and the recovery. And the partnership, which is characterized by the positive and growing diffusions of ICT. We have a high proportion of statistical measures worsening or below average percentage of measures improving for the goal 11, sustainable cities, because of the growing difficulties of public transport and the increase in illegal construction. In goal 4, education, because of the worsening of alphabetic and numeracy skills of students, in particular of in the primary school. We can observe a more stability in environmental goals such as water, life below water, and life on Earth. In particular, in goal 15, life on Earth, there was about 2/3 of measures stable. To have a look at the the progress of sustainable development at territorial level, we classified the measures in 5 homogeneous groups, which can be considered levels of sustainable development. We use the Jank natural intervals method, and you can observe a territorial heterogeneity in favor of the regions on the northeast of the northeast, the upper right part of the graph, where the measures prevail in the 4th and 5th groups, compared to the south and islands, which is the lower left part of the graph, where most of indicators are positioned in the 2 lower levels. The 5th group in particular contains about 40 statistical measures of Bolzano, Trento, and 30 for Valle d'Aosta and for Lombardia. In the first group, on the opposite, is prevalent for Campania, 33 measures in the most disadvantaged group, Calabria 39, and Sicilia 40. For the center, most measures are distributed between the 3rd and the 4th group. We can read sustainable development at territorial level also in a time perspective, and these graphs show you the time evolution of the regions. We have improvement in green, stability in yellow, and deterioration in red. And comparing to 10 years before, Southern Islands region show more marked improvements. Also, if, of course, they are not enough to close the gap with the northern regions. Comparing to 10 years before, Abruzzo and Calabria show, in particular, 60% of regions improving, Toscana and Emilia-Romagna. Comparing to the previous year, the highest percentage of statistical measures improving is in Piemonte, Calabria, Abruzzo, and Puglia. And to analyze the trends of interregional inequalities, which is the other important theme within the SDGs framework, in compliance with the main principle of the agenda, leaving one behind. And so UN asks countries to monitor inequalities by many characteristics, demographic characteristics, territorial characteristics, social characteristics, and so on. And so we analyzed the trends in interregional inequalities by performing measures of territorial convergence, and with the same criteria, convergence, and so better in green, stable in yellow, and worse in red, divergence in this case. In the last 10 years, almost half of the 163 statistical measures indicate convergence between regions, and less than 20% stability, and 35% regional divergence. goal, infrastructure, partnership, and climate action, see a decrease in territorial gaps for all the statistical measures, thanks to the convergence in research and development, and the uniform distribution across the territory of population exposed to the risks of natural disasters. Goal education, gender equality, inequalities, and peace and justice see a prevalence of converging measures, and more than half of the measures are marked by an increase in territorial inequalities in Goal 1, no poverty, Goal 1, no poverty, due to the growing gaps in access to basic services, and Goal 8, work, for the persistent imbalances between regional labor markets, local labor markets. But we do have to consider that convergence is not always an advantage, because it's a target, as I told you before, of the agenda, and not only of the agenda, of the PNRR, for example, which see as a transversal target the reduction of gender, age, and territorial inequalities, imbalances. But we have to consider that when an indicator, we do calculate indicators by, we do calculate for each statistical measure the improvement or deterioration towards sustainable development and convergence and divergence. So this kind of analysis can be done for each statistical measures, but we have to consider that if the conversion is accompanied by a deterioration of the indicator, of course, this is not a progress. So we integrated the regional inequalities with temporal evolution, representing in this graph goals by time evolution on the x-axis and convergence between regions on the y-axis in the last 10 years. Of course, the first semi-piano of the chart is the positive, with improvement and convergence, and the third is the worst, with getting worse and divergence of goals. Progress is more accentuated for goals 5, 9, you can find in the first photo, and all above 17, which is the highest, which are characterized by positive temporal evolutions and territorial convergence. Goals 2, 0 hunger, 7 energy, 10 inequalities, and 16 peace and justice are also characterized by progress in both dimensions, but lower growth, but present lower growth rates, and so they are closer to the origin of the axis. Goal 8, work 14, life below C, and 1 in 0 hunger show poverty, show progress over time, but a worsening of territorial disparities, especially for goal 8. In goal 13, it is the opposite. Goal 3, health, water, sustainable cities, and responsible consumption and production, and life on Earth are instead characterized by relative stability on both dimensions. They are on the origin of the axis. The interlinkages among the goals are a very important issues. I want to cite you a part of a phrase of the agenda, which says that the interlinkages are integrated, and integrated nature of sustainable development goals are of crucial importance in ensuring that the purpose of the new agenda is realized. If we realize our ambitions across the full extent of the agenda, the lives of all will be profoundly improved and our world will be transformed for the better. This is the most challenge, not only in a substantive meaning, reaching improvement for all the goals, but also the main challenge for measuring, because the identification of conceptual, methodological, and substantive relationships between targets and indicators is functional to the integrated reading of the sustainable development, and it is essential to support policy making and monitoring. In terms of improvement of policy coherence by identifying trade-offs and co-benefits. And that's what we tried to do with this year report, with the first exploration of interlinkages between goals based on the data, of course, and I have to shorten, and so a high phenomenological, conceptual, and statistical complexity, and so let me just show you the result. The correlations, we calculated the correlations between about 200 statistical measures in a bivariate form to the co-graduation indices we calculated for each pair of measure, for a total of about 20,000 pairs. Once the correlation matrix was reconstructed, only the significant interlinkages were selected and grouped by goal. And in the total, the significant interconnections are more than 30%, with the higher proportion in goal 17, for so partnership, education, life below, life on earth, and infrastructure and industry, while there is a lower level of interconnections in goal economic growth and work, inequalities, and sustainable cities. You can see the wheel graphs of the only significant interconnections, the positive on the left and the negative on the right. In line with the main international research, the synergies, so positive interactions, prevail. They are about 70%, while the trade-offs are 30%. Each goal has at least one positive link which each of the other ones. Among the trade-offs, a number of links between goals are absent. This first exploration opens to further development to support, as I told you before, action plans to policy coherence. We do have to study it, of course, much more. There was something about goal 2, but I think it's too late. I will let you which is the one most related with our event and this project. I will let you the slides. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. And I would like to welcome now Federica Morandi. She's assistant researcher at CREA, Agricultural Policies and Bioeconomy, and she will discuss how sustainability provisions are being applied in preferential trade agreements. Thank you, Federica. The floor is yours, and I will share your presentation.
Thank you, Anastasia. Hi, everyone. I'm very glad to be here today to talk about sustainability provisions and trade. Yeah, this is it. So we can go. I guess the URL? Okay. Yeah. So I'll give you a little bit of context before starting. So we are in the context of preferential trade agreements that are designed to promote trade and economic cooperation between partners. it is important to keep in mind that these agreements over time have progressively started to include provisions that covered a wide range of issues. And today they include environment, labor rights, investment, intellectual property rights, and migration. If the market opening between partners is reciprocal, we can talk about free trade agreements. And the new generation of FTAs contains what is called a Trade and Sustainable Development Chapter, which is based on 3 pillars. First, he has to include binding commitments to labor and environmental standards. Then he has to include structures to involve civil society and a dedicated dispute settlement mechanism. The EU currently has 42 preferential trade agreements in place, and 11 of these ones are new generation FTAs that include a TSD chapter, and you can see here colored in the countries colored in green. This work is part of the project Trades for Sustainable Development that Professor Jambor illustrated to us before. It is part of Work Package 2, and that through evidence-based approach aims to investigate how sustainability provision included in the EU trade agreements are currently working, identifying gaps and lessons learned. And we do this considering 3 case studies, and we analyze 3 value chains in 3 different countries. We have cocoa in Vietnam, coffee in Vietnam, cocoa in Ghana, and olive oil in Tunisia. Why did we choose these 3 countries is because they are important trade partners for the Union, and it's interesting to see the difference in the agreements, because they all have different kind of agreements at different stages of negotiation or development. Why did we choose these 3 value chains? Because on one hand, they are important agricultural imports of the Union, and on the other hand, they are very important and crucial production in the countries where they are produced. And most importantly, they raise important environmental issues in the countries where they are produced. I'll give you some example, like excessive pesticide and fertilizer use or deforestation for Vietnam and Ghana, or issues of water scarcity and desertification in Tunisia. So to evaluate the impact of trade agreements on sustainability, we conducted semi-structured interviews in these countries with relevant stakeholders that are policymakers, researchers, agricultural holdings, or supply chain operators. In order to do so, the interview were conducted by our partners, the partners of the project in these countries. Before going to the results of the analysis, I would like to focus a little bit on the differences between the type of agreements that these countries have with the EU. In Vietnam, we have a new generation FTA that is in place since 2020, and since it's a new generation agreement, a sustainability impact assessment was conducted before the implementation of the agreement, and it includes Trade and Sustainable Development Chapter. Ghana and the EU have an economic partnership agreement that is in place since 2016, and a sustainability impact assessment was not actually conducted specifically for the country, but there was a general one for the ECOWAS region, and this agreement does not include a TSD chapter. Tunisia, in the case of Tunisia, there are negotiations going on for a new deep and comprehensive free trade agreement, and but nowadays is still in place the association agreement since 1998. In preparation of this new agreement, a sustainability impact assessment was already conducted in the country, and the negotiation of what to include in the TSD chapter is actually going on right now. So, for what concerns the results, so stakeholders were asked what they think the advantages and challenges of the agreement in each country are. And the Vietnamese stakeholders answered that when it comes to advantages, there was an increase of coffee export and investment in Vietnam, and there was an increase in quality of the coffee as well as the value added, and there was an improvement in stakeholder welfare. When asked about challenges, the first one that they identified, it was the small farmers and medium firms. They face market access difficulties due to limited capacity, and that these small farmers struggle to comply with the very high European standards of quality. And they also pointed out that there was in unlimited use of the cooperation mechanism that the TSD chapter give. When they ask overall if the FTA pays enough attention to sustainability issues, they reply that it does improve the agreement improve the quality of coffee and agricultural products in general. When it comes to Ghana, so stakeholders were asked the same question, and they reply again that the main advantages of the agreement were the duty-free access of cocoa to the EU market, and in general, a lower economic growth in the country. But we have to remember that the main goal of the agreement was the economic growth. When asked about challenges, they pointed out that cocoa is currently exported basically only in beans to the EU, and this limits their chances to add value to the product. Again, even in Ghana, they highlighted the fact that there was a low cooperation between Ghanaian and European stakeholders through the process. And they also say that the agreement focuses on trade, but not on the production issues, and it does not pay attention enough to environmental issues. I think you will see them later better with Professor Arma, but the main cocoa and main environmental challenges in the cocoa sector in Ghana are refer to the excessive pesticide use, deforestation, and mining. I forgot to say that an important take that came out from the survey is that Ghanaian stakeholder perceive sustainability issues as crucial both for the future of the country itself and the relations with the EU. For Tunisia's case, the question asked were a little bit different because the new agreement is still not in place. So they were asked about the potential advantages or disadvantages of the implementation of this agreement. So larger stakeholders see the agreement as a great opportunity for market opening, and they think that it would bring an overall economic growth in the country, and they see it also as an opportunity to modernize the olive oil sector. When they asked about challenges, again, a point that came out was the risk of marginalization of small producers due to the fact that they will have a very different documentation to fill in order to comply with the high European standards. And they also said, and also came out from the sustainability impact assessment, that this agreement would lead to an increase of production, that if it's not done correctly, it will lead to an intensification of environmental concerns that already exist in the country, that are basically related to water and soil degradation. An important matter that is going on for the negotiation is that Tunisian exports to Europe olive oil in bulk, mainly, and this it limits their ability to add value to the oil in the country, and they would like to boost the productivity of bottle and breaded exports. But obviously they are competitors, so this is why the negotiation is still going on. So what are the main lessons that we learned from these interviews is that stakeholders perceive environmental issues and sustainability issues as crucial, and they're not in conflict with smart and profitable business strategies. We also found that the sustainability impact assessment was very important for the design of the TSD provision, and that there was a low involvement of stakeholders in the design of this chapter. It's important to say that this the TSD chapter should be seen as a foundation for sustainability and cooperation, but it should be complemented with additional measures if we want to address specific challenges. I'm thinking about the deforestation regulation, for example, in Ghana. Also, it's important to say that the impact of these trade agreements on sustainability depends also on how they are received in the country with the strength of national laws and how local communities respond to it. So, policy recommendations. Yes, it is important to include a TSD provision in trade agreements, and but to fully exploit the potential of these chapters, the EU should address some key challenges that came out from our study. First of all, the limited awareness and capacities among stakeholders, especially small ones, that struggle to comply. This could be solved with a workshop for capacity building and knowledge sharing. As I said, limited compliance with unilateral standards due to lack of information on these standards, and this could be solved by giving training programs for small farmers to actually get to know what are the requirements that they need to meet. And finally, in all countries, it came out that there was poor cooperation and dialogue among stakeholders, and so it would be helpful before the agreement, so with the design, and after the agreement with the monitoring, a better dialogue with the stakeholder in the countries. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you for your presentation, Federico. We are now ready to begin our first discussion, which will be led by Professor Perry, who will guide us through these topics. Professor Perry, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Well, it's again, it's a big pleasure to have you here and to be participating in this presentation. I enjoyed the two presentations by the colleagues from ISTAT and from CREA. And regarding the two presentations, I would have many questions, but I will limit myself to just a few. And regarding the presentation by ISTAT, I appreciated the completeness of the approach that the National Institute of Statistics has taken to measure the phenomenon under study of the sustainable transition and the sustainable development goals. It is very important to have those granular measures that you have shown us, and if we are able to measure correctly those phenomena, this is a first step in order to monitor what is being done and also to plan additional policy corrections for the future. Now, I have two questions. I will limit myself to two questions, and then I will pose also the questions for the presentation by CREA, and I will leave you the floor to answer, or maybe we could let also some other questions from the floor. First, it is a question I have is how are the measures of the SDGs related to the best measures that the ISTA developed a few years ago, because a part of the Sustainable Development Goals is social, and the best measures were meant to introduce innovative measures of social inclusion and social well-being. The second question I have for you is, I appreciated very much the exercise you showed us to draw to try to figure out the interlinkages between the SDGs. But from your presentation it was not clear to me. It was not clear to me whether you were doing that by using the targets or the indicators, because I mean, SDGs are a complex building, and if you want to operationalize any correlation, you need to go deeper, and I suppose you did it. And if that was done at the target level or indicators level, it is very interesting to look at bilateral pairwise correlations, but sustainable transition is a holistic issue, and I wonder whether it would make sense to search for systemic relationships rather than bilateral pairwise relationships across SDGs. And I wonder whether this can be part of your future agenda for research. Now, regarding the paper that was presented by CREA, I have three questions, and we have seen that the preferential trade agreements are becoming very important in shaping trade, also, or maybe particularly in the agri-food sector. And I wonder who is in charge of monitoring the respect of these preferential trade agreements, and if the monitoring is effective or not. This is an important question because of the of the fallouts that we would have also in terms of achieving the impact in terms of sustainable development. The second question is, my second question is, given the difficulties that you found for the small farmers to comply with the preferential trade agreements, the requirements in the preferential trade agreements, would it make sense to have some support in terms of microfinance to provide the resources for the local farmers to invest the money they need in order to transform and make their production more sustainable according to what is prescribed in those PDAs? Finally, and this is perhaps a question that regards also the presentation by ISTAT, we are experiencing it's not a U-turn, but it is a revision in the strategy towards sustainable transition at the European level, at the individual countries level, but mostly it is a European phenomenon. And one of the possible lines, strategic lines of action may be represented by the report presented last week by President Draghi, former President Draghi, which is titled "The Future of European Competitiveness." And yesterday there was a meeting here in Rome at the assembly of Confindustria. We had the Prime Minister Meloni, who supported the idea that there were a lot of mistakes in specifying the Green Deal, the European Green Deal. She didn't go into the details, but we have to trust our prime minister, and it will be interesting to learn how the revision will happen. Simply, it is a little bit cacophonic to see that we have the flood in Emilia-Romagna for the second year in a row, and we are talking about stopping what we were doing to repair and moving towards decarbonization. But anyhow, what is there in the Draghi report is that we will need to compromise, to find a compromise between decarbonizing and the green transition and keeping our industries competitive. Now, something wrong was done, of course. Think of the big problem of planning to move into electric engines, having no producer in Europe, or other errors have been made, and these should be corrected. But at the same time, we should take stock of the fact that the green transition policies have produced some advantages, which are also economic advantages. Think of the renewable energy. In 2020, almost 40% of energy in Europe was produced by renewable energy. The compared data in the US was 20%. And there are several other areas, measures that can be used to testify that. But anyhow, looking at the compromise between competitiveness, industrial competitiveness, and sustainable development, the question for ISTAT would be, how do we introduce competitiveness into the 2030 agenda scheme? Do we need number 18 objective, or is it transversal? Or maybe it regards mostly number 8, SDG 8, which is related to production, or SDG 12, which is also relating to the circular economy and things like that. And the question for CREA is, in the Draghi report, we find specific reference to that trade policy needs to be fully aligned with the European industrial strategy. And so how do you think and the Draghi report also makes reference to the preferential trade agreements. Is there any specific implication for the preferential trade agreements that we saw, that you analyzed in the agri-food value chains? Sorry for posing too many questions, maybe, but I needed to open up and break the ice, an expression that will not be possible to use in the future when there will be no ice on that. Okay? Do you want to collect additional questions from the floor? Or
do you have any questions for our speakers? It's online. We have a question for Federica.
Okay, please.
As recently we see a parallelism on FTA, TSD, and unilateral EUDR, both affecting sustainability and trade, but by different means. Are you considering this parallelism affecting both trade partners of the EU? In many countries, stakeholders are concerned according to the risk for small farmers.
Okay, please take note of that. And other questions from the floor?
Despite of the overall systemic ambition and idea of SDGs, at least politically, trade-offs are perceived and can appear, food security versus operational trade. Is there a way to measure trade-offs across SDGs sub-targets? I think this one is
for ISTAT, maybe for ISTAT.
I can show you that.
Okay, so let's follow the order of the presentation. I will give the floor to Leopoldo Nascia from ISTAT, who has a rich number of questions to answer, if you wish.
I try to answer in a holistic way to all the questions in order for a matter of clarity. I start from your last question that was about a competition in Agenda 2030. The focus of Agenda 2030 is not competition, it's sustainability. Competition is not a goal by itself. What? Scusatemi. Sorry. Competition is not the goal of the Agenda 2030. Is the accent is sustainability. We share with equitable and sustainable well-being that is related to your first question. Many indicators, more than 60 measurements, and similarly to them, we have a different target, a different goal than competitiveness. For them is well-being. In SDGs, that is an international, it's a global model, it's a global goal, so it's tailored for the whole world, worldwide. The goal is to have a sustainable development, not growth necessarily. That it include private business in Goal 9 and Goal 8, and also in the other goals there we talk about private business within the framework of sustainability, of equalities. You have the list of the 17 SDGs where the term competitiveness is not the key term. At all, is sustainability, sustainable production. We have, and now I make the interlinkage to the question about interlinkages. And we have, in some cases, a trade-off between goals. There are some studies. I remember one of Sachs, so a relevant scholar of this subject, that demonstrated that there is a trade-off between individual well-being and sustainability in the short term. So the study of the trade-off and synergies that in our report is still at a preliminary state, for it needs a lot of time, it needs a lot of study and analysis on the relevant literature about Agenda 2030. It's relevant also to understand what are the best policies. Our role as National Institute of Statistics is to provide the most updated, the best measurements for the indicator, for the targets. So in our database, as I told before, shared partially with the well-being, equitable, sustainable well-being. We work in team with them to develop, to set up new indicators, no measurements, according to the official nomenclature classifications for comparability across states, across countries. It's a value of quality of statistics, and it helps also the policymaker and the measure stakeholders to address policies, to address choices, private and public choices. And still about the holistic approach of Agenda 2030, of Agenda 2030, I think in Italian sometimes still, it's holistic, but it's not all-inclusive, especially on the economic terms. I make an example. You cited the Prime Minister of Italy, the current Prime Minister. When we talk of Green Deal, of Agenda 2030, when we talk of well-being, everything is wonderful, but the first goal of every government in the European Union with the euro currency is the budget, is the deficit of balance, budget deficit, and the debt, the public debt. So there is a trade-off very clearly between low deficit and sustainability. And this is also a contradiction of some European policies. And for our side, is also a way to say that it's holistic, but there are some missing bricks, missing parts, like the financial variables that have a huge impact, not only for the public sector, also for the private business. For any firm, any private business, especially is in the stock exchange, have to gain profits. Otherwise, there is the bankruptcies, the shares fall down. It's not a great deal for them. So, for this reason, it's very important to set up priorities, to find the best indicators, the best measurements for the targets defined by United Nations, by us, and to add, this is an activity that we do from years, national context indicators that are tailored for Italy, for our country, are not necessarily the same indicator of the other country, also for even if it's holistic, SDGs are not based on the monoeconomic theory. So the same farm in the farm in Ghana is similar to the farm in France, in Italy, and Germany. That is not the partner. That is not the model. The indicator may differ from country to the country, and also priorities. I don't know if I have more time. I can talk. I don't want to bore people, to annoy everyone.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Aldo, and I would give the floor to Federica. Please.
I will first answer to the online question. Anche io.
Okay. Federica.
I will first reply to these questions, and if Federica has something to add, she can. No problem. So for the online question, now we actually didn't take into consideration this parallelism, but it's a very interesting point, and we can surely integrate it in the next work package that we're actually working on right now, work package 4, and where we are considering the risk for small farmers, because we're actually going with we got now the results from a quantitative survey in farmers in Ghana and Vietnam. So thank you for the advice. For the questions of Professor Ferry, I would say first one with regards to monitoring. There are different actors that actually monitor the implementation of these agreements, and the EU continuously monitor the implementation and the impact. When it comes to implementation, obviously is important, as we saw from the results of the study, the cooperation with the partners and the countries, so like the national governments, they should collaborate, obviously, for the implementation in their own countries. When it comes to the impact, the EU is done basically from research institute. Basically, so it's what we did. But there are so many organizations that evaluate the impact of this kind of agreements. For the second questions about microfinance, I'm not sure, but if you have thoughts on it that you can share, I'm not sure microfinance is too much helpful in this case, because what they lack is training, is the information. So maybe microfinance in the
Company
yeah, they basically these training programs they require an expert from the union, basically. But maybe they can use it with extensive services. Maybe in that part of the microfinance services, maybe that, yes. But I still like training programs. And we concern to the third question, I think the main implication for agricultural value chain is that that they have to be aligned with the industrial European industrial policy. I think the implication would be mostly on the production of the goods and the sustainability issues. So we have to make sure that if we work in the industry is pushing on sustainability. Also, the products that we import, they also have to have high standards and comply with ours. And I don't know if Federica wants to add something to this. I hope I reply to your question.
Okay, thank you very much. I think it is time to move on. I am told by Gaia we will do the coffee break at the end. Is that confirmed? Okay, so you can. We are acting like Tantalos. There is food there, but you cannot touch it until the end. So, who is chairing next session?
The second section will be on global food value chain. And we will now hear from Ilenia Manetti, a researcher at CREA, and she will provide us a preliminary analysis of tea value chain in Vietnam. Please, Ilenia.
Yes. Share the presentation. Hello, everyone. I don't know if you can. Yes. So, good morning again, everyone. Thanks for your presence here. This presentation will delve actually deeper into the socioeconomic and environmental sustainability issue in one specific value chain, that is the Vietnamese tea one. And it is about preliminary results, actually, because this study is a study that is ongoing. So we are basically showing you what we have right now. So just a little bit of context and some information about international trade of this commodity. So Vietnamese tea is one of the long-standing cultivated crop in Vietnam. And of course, it is, let's say, a cultural product, because it is something that is used and consumed by Vietnamese people every day. It has a pivotal role in the domestic socioeconomic development, and it is a source of income, especially for rural smallholder farmers that own basically mainly its production throughout the country. This commodity is actually produced across all the country, as you can see from the picture that is shown in the presentation. But there are some provinces that are remarkable for quantity and quality of production, and they are situated both in the northern part and in the midland areas. So actually from the 90s, there was a significant increase in both the land used for cultivating tea and also for the productivity of the production itself. So last year, delving deeper a bit in the economic performances, 2023 was actually defined in the literature as a more difficult year for Vietnamese tea exports, and it was mainly due to some market some market restrictions applied from import countries, and also for a weak market demand. But if you can see, as you can see from the graph, recent data and also projections which are made during 2024 by FAO, confirm the country's expected increase in production and export, with a growth rate that is around 1% for black tea in terms of production and 2.5% in terms of export, and for green tea that has a better, let's say, a better performance compared to black tea, with a production projection of 1.5% and a 2.6% growth rate projected to export. So, delving deeper into the European-Vietnamese trade relations, as Federica already said, they are regulated by a free trade agreement that entered into force in August 2020 after 10 years of negotiations. And it is based mainly on the elimination of tariff and non-tariff measures, but also in promoting the sustainable development of the country and the enhancement of labor difficulties and, of course, their betterness, and also the commitment for trade liberalization in services, and of course the support to the main global value chains. So okay, so as I was saying, the about the relationship between European Union and Vietnam and Vietnamese economy, for the period 2019-2023, the category coffee, tea, cocoa, and spices was has been ranked first among the 15 most imported agri-food goods in the EU from Vietnam, and these data are from the DG Agri of the European Union, and the country is ranked 12th import partners for a value for more than 3 billion euros. So this kind of agreement that Vietnam has with the European Union brings, of course, opportunities, but with opportunities also risks and some barriers. So delving in the literature about this topic, some studies affirm that this agreement brought some positive effect on the agricultural product in general, in terms of import and export volumes. And actually, this is very similar to what also our studies in Tunisia and also Ghana have underlined. Others claim that these opportunities can also bring some negative shifts in terms of management, but also in terms of price competition in the internal market. So some needs emerge from the literature, and these are that local businesses need to focus on innovation to avoid being left behind this economic process, and that there is a need of improvement of both processes and product quality to meet the very high international standards. So actually there are some barriers to the agri-food products trade with the European Union that of course concern also tea, and these are non-tariff measures, sanitary and phytosanitary measures, and technical barriers to trade, which actually are considered in the literature as true obstacles to the fruition of the preferential tariffs to which the country actually is entitled. So, which is the consequence, especially for tea, that the developing countries, which are also, let's say, near Vietnam, remain among the main importers in their traditional markets, with, of course, low requirement in terms of also and especially phytosanitary measures. So, delving deeper into how the tea is traded abroad, Vietnamese tea is traded through state enterprises, joint ventures, and foreign businesses, and private businesses. And actually, the private sector is becoming more and more dominant in this domain. So to be underlined, and also here we have a similarity with our previous presentation. Most of the tea exports are currently sold as raw material. So this means that tea is actually sold basically in leaves. So it is not worked in the country as a final product, and this means that the added value for tea exporters remain low, despite the product is actually sold everywhere in the world. So our analysis it's based mainly on studying the three sustainability dimensions within the tea value chain, and we try to link these issues with some sustainable development goals that, according to us, are fundamental for our project, and according to us are important in this specific value chain. So for the economic sustainability aspects, we underlined that there is actually poor quality and efficiency actually in the overall agricultural sector, that is characterized by fluctuating prices and export earnings that are falling. In general, tea is produced by smallholder farmers that work by their own, so they are not employed in larger farms, for example, and the average of land that they work is of about 0.2 hectares per household. So it's, they are very small farms, and they have not well standardized farming practices, which are linked to the use of polluting pesticides and also to the use of all the varieties of tea that, of course, has a low productivity. And in general, there are difficulties in accessing technologies and also post-harvesting technologies. And there are also some lack of marketing promotion strategies and capacities, and the difficulties in accessing also certification schemes, which, of course, are different, for in terms of possibilities among larger farms and small farms. So in here we found out that the two most important SDGs that are linked to these kind of issues are the number 8 and 17. So the one related to the inclusive growth, and the one related to public-private partnership to develop sustainable development. But some existing practices are working in the right direction to actually boost these targets and goals. And these are the creation of cooperatives and farmers association that is becoming, it's difficult but not impossible in the countries. The sustainability standard adoption, that of course is also encouraged if you are a member of an association or a cooperative. For example, the VietGAP, which is a standard that has been promoted since 2008 from the Ministry of Agriculture. And also there is a strong presence of international development projects that are trying to put together all the stakeholders of the value chain, and so they are working towards the SDG 17 implementation. Regarding the environmental sustainability aspect of the value chain, the main issue is the copious use of chemical pesticides using in the tea value chain that affect water, affect soil, and of course this practice affect the product quality and the health of both farmers and consumers. Vietnam is actually a country that is affected by climate change, and of course tea is
in this way affected because the plantation rely mainly on weather conditions, and this is affecting actually the water that is more and more scarce, and so in this kind of analysis, we underline that the two SDGs most affected by this kind of issue are the number 8, so the one related to inclusive growth, and the number 15, so the one related to the protection of ecosystems. So these kind of environmental issues, in general in the agricultural sector, but also and specifically in the tea value chain, developed a need for a paradigm shift that emerged, and so a transition from the traditional way of producing tea to alternative agroecological practices is happening actually in Vietnam during these years, with also some policies implementation and the promotion of the adoption of quality standards. So some examples are the organic agriculture and also the agroforestry that, of course, have benefit in terms of income, of soil recovery, of water retention, and in the use of organic fertilizers instead of chemical ones. There are also some projects and policies which are boosted by both ministries and the international organization that are done in response to climate change, and there is the diffusion of these national and international quality standards, which are boosted mainly by sector association. So last but not least, the social sustainability aspect. Of course, the social part is linked to the economic and environmental one, because the social sphere is shaped by the production method that affect the health and livelihood of tea farmers. A very interesting thing that emerged from the literature is that both the agricultural sector in general and the tea value chain have a strong presence of women working as women farmers, but in the same, in these two different levels, they face the same gender inequalities in terms of salaries, in terms of access to credit, in terms of access to training, or also to extension services. And a very interesting thing is that being the farms in general very small, women working in farms, their work is considered as something like due for the family. So most of the time it is not paid. Another, let's say, interesting thing is the good level of education that farmers seems to have from the literature we analyzed compared to other Asian countries like India or Indonesia, for example. And a very important thing to be underlined is that in Vietnam there is no presence of independent trade union. So this is causing both internal disorders like strikes that are organized by farmers, and also international pressures from parties that are sharing with Vietnam some, for example, economic agreement like the European Union, who is boosting the let's say, adoption of specific regulation on human rights and worker rights. So in this case, of course, SDGs 5 on gender equality and SDGs 8 are mainly affected. But as for the other dimension, a series of political and practical actions are put in place right now to reach these targets. And we put here just two examples. One is the Sustainable Agricultural Development Strategy 2021-2030 that is put in place by the Ministry of Agriculture, and the other example are the very much projects that actually are now ongoing in Vietnam, and they are boosted by international entities to secure the livelihood and to decrease tea farmers' vulnerability. And some examples are the United Nations Environmental Program, but also the Development Program, Ricolto, which is an international NGO working in the sector, and Rainforest Alliance. So thank you very much. Hope it has been interesting, and if you have questions, we are here.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Magno. And now we will hear from Ralph, who will share with us some insights on the cocoa value chain in Ghana. And he is working at the National Institute of Statistics in Ghana. Wait, I'll make you able to present. Ralph, are you here?
Okay, Ralph, maybe you can start introducing yourself and introducing the research while Anastasia is putting online your presentation. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Thanks. First of all, I'd like to say that I'm really happy to be here. My name is Ralph Ama. I am a research fellow at the Institute for Statistical, Social and Economic Research at the University of Ghana. I've been part of this Trade for SD consortium since its inception, and I've had the opportunity of meeting and working with amazing people on the team. I'm going to briefly share with you some insights on the cocoa value chain in Ghana. Quite a number of things have been shared already by the previous presenters, and so I'll just be highlighting on what has already been shared, and then probably opening up some few things for discussion when we get to the question session. And please pardon me, I have a very bad cold this morning, but I'll try and present through it. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so Ghana's cocoa value chain looks like this. We have a number of farmer groups or farmer-based organizations, and then some other farmers who do not belong to these FBOs. These farmers usually receive their inputs from Cocoa Board, and Cocoa Board is the regulatory body of cocoa production exports in Ghana. They are so in Ghana, the government is like the main buyer of cocoa and the main exporter of cocoa as well. So no other person can go aside government to do any exportation or buying of cocoa. In this regard, they receive some inputs from Cocoa Board, which are subsidized. So these can come in the form of fertilizers, pesticides, etc. And then they can also buy from private input dealers. When they produce their cocoa, they sometimes give some to cocoa waste companies who use the pods, etc., for other products like black soap, etc. So they are the byproduct aspect of cocoa production. But then when cocoa is produced, they sell to LBCs. LBCs are licensed buying companies. These companies are licensed by the regulator of cocoa in Ghana, which is Cocoa Board. And these licensed buying companies sometimes also operate under some certification companies like Rainforest Alliance. So RA Woods, some of them operate under fair trade, others operate under organic, and then other certification and voluntary standards that are out there. When as some are buying, as the LBCs are getting cocoa from the cocoa farmers, there are other cocoa farmers who also sell to individual buyers, and these are considered illegal buyers because it's illegal for any other individual to be buying cocoa without a license from Cocoa Board. The individual buyers sometimes also smuggle the cocoa out of the country to neighboring countries, for example, Ivory Coast, especially when the pricing regime in the neighboring country seems higher than in Ghana. In Ghana, every year, the regulator announces the price at which it will be purchasing cocoa from the farmers. So cocoa farmers know beforehand how much money they will be receiving per bag of cocoa. You would also notice in this diagram that there's quality control at almost every point of the value chain. So when these license buying companies get the cocoa from the cocoa farmers, they haul the cocoa to the ports, and then at the central point, we have some local producers who buy some of the beans from Cocoa Board, and this is just about 20% of the total bean production in Ghana. And of the 20% that is bought, about 95% is semi-processed into other products and sent outside of the country as export. And then just about 5% is processed in the country for local consumption. So in total, about 80% of the cocoa beans that are produced leave the country to various destinations, of which the EU is the top. Okay. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Great. All right. So what have we done so far? We conducted desk analysis of various provisions of the Economic Partnership Agreement and its linkages with the SDGs. We also conducted some quantitative surveys of cocoa farmers. We recently added the cashew value chain, but that is not the topic of discussion for today. We conducted some qualitative interviews as well. In this regard, we interviewed both state and parastatal organizations. We spoke with some CSOs, NGOs, farmer-based organizations, certification companies that are resident in Ghana, and researchers. We also have spoken in the past with some government officials who are, or let me say, policymakers in the space. You can move on, please.
Can you see
on,
that?
Please.
It's already in the next slide. I think it's a bit slow, the internet connection.
Yeah. Okay, no worries. So, what is the importance of cocoa to Ghana? As we speak, Ghana's agriculture sector, on average, contributes about 23% of the country's GDP. And the share of cocoa to agricultural export earnings alone is about $2 billion. The cocoa sector is directly or indirectly linked to about 850 to 1 million households in Ghana. And like I said earlier, much of the cocoa beans that are exported out of the country have the EU as their destination. Now, income from cocoa sales alone accounts for about 61% of total household income among cocoa farming households, which is a very significant percentage that comes to them. The share of cocoa now in merchandise exports, it's about 12% of a total. You can move on to the next slide, please. And the cocoa subsector alone accounts for about 82.6% of all agricultural exports in Ghana. The table that I've shown looks at merchandise exports from 2019 to 2023. And you see in there for cocoa, for minerals, and minerals here we are talking about gold, bauxite, diamond, etc. We also have timber and other exports with their percentage contribution to merchandise exports. You would see that the percentage contribution of cocoa alone is about 12.2%, and it's only second to mineral exports, which is about 47.1% of the total exports. I've highlighted this for a reason, which I'll be sharing as we move on. Next slide, please. So we see that in 2023 alone, cocoa exports reduced by about 11.7% in total value to reach just 2.03 billion. If you look clearly, you will see that the 2022 value was also lower than the 2021 value. And I'll be sharing with you some insights from what we are gathering in the field regarding what could be informing the decrease. And the unit price of cocoa beans also fell by about 0.2%. This notwithstanding, the price of cocoa products increased by about 7.1%, telling us that focusing on the export of just cocoa beans would not really yield the desired results that we're looking for in terms of export revenue, but also adding value can up the revenue that Ghana would be getting if it were to do so. Now we see also that cocoa beans recorded increased export volume of about 0.2%, while volume of cocoa products declined by about 23.8%. So despite the decline of the volume of cocoa products, we see that the unit price of the product was high. And so if we were to focus on adding value, tendency that would also enhance the export revenue that we get from the cocoa product. Federica, one of the earlier presenters talked about the EPAs in the 3 case study countries, and I just want to touch base on a few things that she may have mentioned or probably left out for me. The chronology of EU and ECOWAS EPA started about September 2027 with the EU-Ghana interim EPA. We had the full EPA in December 2016, and then the EU-ECOWAS EPA came into effect. We had the ECOWAS Sustainability Impact Assessment between 2004 and 2007. You can move to the next slide, please. And the EU-ECOWAS EPA and sustainable development. For that, we see that there is no specific provision on sustainable development in the text of the agreement. When you go through the agreement, you see that there is actually sustainable development is mentioned only about 3 times in the EU-Ghana EPA. I had a conversation or an interview with the EU delegation in Ghana, and they alluded to the fact that there is no trade and sustainability development chapter in the EPA. I spoke with some of the representatives at the regulatory body, which is Cocoa Board, and they also mentioned that even though we seem to be operating the full EPA, what they are seeing is more of the interim EPA being enforced. So it's really important to have that in mind because of the environmental partnership agreement that Ghana has with the EU, there's actually no provision for sustainable development in the text. Now, the EU-Ghana Alliance on Sustainable Cocoa has some very interesting things to show. You can move to the next slide, please. We see that despite the absence of a sustainability provision in the EU-Ghana EPA, the EU countries continue to discuss sustainable cocoa production in the context of the EPA. And given the increasing threat of Ghana losing some portions of forest reserve to cocoa production and other environmental issues, the EU adopted what they call the EUDR, the European Union Deforestation Regulation, to ensure that products exported to the EU market are free of deforestation. Further, the cocoa entering the EU must meet traceability standards and legal compliance requirements. So they started this traceability agenda to more or less act as some type of a country of origin labeling that can be able to track where the cocoa is coming from to the last mile and to actually track it to the farm. This is something that has been widely received in Ghana and is being pushed. It's an agenda that is really being pushed by the EU delegation. And Cocoa Board is working closely with them to make sure that it comes to be. Next slide, please. So now that we've looked at the cocoa value chain and some of the sustainability development issues in the EPA, I'd like to bring both together now. You see on the next slide that there's a picture on the right-hand side. And this picture shows three main blocks. You see two branches at the top, which is the human rights and the environmental protection, hinging on living income. It is really interesting what I'm showing here, and I picked this from the Cocoa Barometer report of 2022. We see here that there are several issues of human rights. We have child labor, human trafficking, we have other labor rights being infringed upon migrant workers, and whether they are receiving the right pay, etc. And then we also see environmental issues like degradation and deforestation. We see loss of biodiversity. One of the earlier presenters mentioned the high use of agrochemicals, the issue about climate change, etc. But we also can see that this is hinged upon living income. So you will notice that the human rights issue borders on the social sustainability, the environmental protection issue borders on environmental sustainability, and living income borders on the economic sustainability. And I agree with the assertion of the Cocoa Barometer report that without significantly increasing farm gate prices, sustainability in the cocoa sector will just be a pipe dream. Why do I say this? I attended the cocoa conference in Brussels this year, and it was on paying more for sustainable cocoa. And the question that I kept asking myself is, what is more for sustainable cocoa? What is a living income in the first place? Until we are able to come up with the right living income that can sustain the cocoa farmer, then we will just be, talking about things that probably may never be realized. We see that there's competition between the cocoa sector and galamsey for land. Now, galamsey is illegal mining. It's a term for illegal mining in Ghana. We see that there is a competition between cocoa production and illegal mining for land, for labor, and for water. I spoke with one of the Association for Small-Scale Mining. One of the things they told me was that there is no alternative to mining. Now, if there is no alternative to mining, what are we doing to make sure that our cocoa farms and our forests are actually insulated against the activities of illegal miners who are willing to pay to actually clear cocoa farms and grow their and go on illegal mining. Now, just to share with you some remaining challenges, we see that there is heavy price control in the cocoa sector. Now, because of the regime that is being operated by Cocoa Board, cocoa farmers' incomes remain very low, and year in and year out, we hear complaints here and there. Despite the surge in world cocoa price, we still see that the prices they are receiving per ton in Ghana may not compare. And this is because the regulator operates a system where it keeps some amount in a fund so that if world prices are lower, it can go to the fund to shore up cocoa prices that is paid to the farmers. We also see high cost of farm inputs for cocoa farmers. Small cocoa producers are unable to really acquire the necessary farm inputs, which most of the time are subsidized, but they may not come that early. And because they need those inputs, they may have to resort to buying them. Now, without a good living income, this may be some type of a wish that they will never really realize. We also see that the issues of climate change is playing out. Aside the problem of illegal mining in the cocoa sector, we saw drought this year, which will play out next year when it comes to cocoa harvests. The drought has been very severe in many cocoa producing areas, and we suspect that in the coming year we'll have an issue with meeting the production levels that would be targeted to meet. These are the remaining challenges that we are investigating, and we just came back from the field with some data that we have shared with CREA, and we're in the process of analyzing them to see the way forward. I'll end here and look forward to your questions. Fred, Anastasia, I moved to the next slide already. I'm sorry about that.
Can you see it?
I see the last but 2 slides, but I moved to the remaining challenges slide, which is clear. I spoke about this. Yeah, I can see it now, but I yeah, I spoke about this already. So yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for your presentation. And I will now pass the floor to Gaia, and she will present some insights on the EU Deforestation Free Products Regulation. And please stay online, Ralph, because we will have the discussion later.
So thank you very much. My name is Gaia Angelini from Lumina Consult. And today I am presenting an outlook about a regulation that it's about to come into force in January of next year. It's a regulation that deals with deforestation and forest degradation. It's a very important regulation because it actually has a very wide horizontal strand, especially in relation to tackling the impact of agriculture on a number of SDGs goals. So the regulation was actually proposed in 2023, and it's about facing the impact of the products that we receive in the European Union, and that have an impact on deforestation and forest degradation in other countries in the world, and also, of course, in the European Union. Now, in the last 10,000 years, the world has lost about 1/3 of its forest. This means a size of about 2 times the United States. But half of this loss has occurred in the last 100 years, and mainly in the last 20 years. And this loss is associated directly to the expansion of agriculture. And the area in the world that is mainly affected are the tropical and subtropical areas, and as a country, mainly Brazil and Indonesia. But there is an increasing threat happening in Africa too. So the FAO has calculated, as you can see from the slides, that 420 million hectares of forest, so something bigger than the European Union size, have been lost between 1990s and 2020. and that every year the world continues to lose 10 million hectares of forest. The starting point of this important discussion that led to the adoption of a very comprehensive European legislation is that the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis are interlinked. So while forests absorb CO2 and therefore help facing climate change impacts and mitigate them, on the other side, when there is deforestation, the deforestation contributes to increase CO2 and therefore contributes to climate change. So, sorry, I've done something wrong on the slide. Next slide, thank you. So, forest fires occur very often, as we experience every year, regardless of the origin of these fires, and they are expanded in area where there is forest degradation and deforestation. All this is already known by science. We don't have to remind it. So climate breakdown induces the loss of biodiversity, and here are the interlinkages. And this is why we have to kind of mitigate the biodiversity loss, and by mitigating the biodiversity loss, we will also protect the planet from climate change. I would like to show you a very short video that has been produced by UNEP that try to answer this question: why we have to transition to a deforestation-free agriculture. So let's look at this video together.
Did you know that on average, 7 billion hectares of tropical forests disappear every year? The equivalent of 26 football fields. Most of it comes from agriculture, efficient, large farming businesses, or low-yield, smallholder farmers. But in order to feed a rising population, farmers need to produce more, and their most cost-effective solution is for them to make the rain. However, today, nearly 40% of our land surface is already dedicated to agriculture. If this goes on, we won't tackle the climate crisis or meet the sustainable development goals. It is critical that we transition towards free agriculture. But there are obstacles. First, farmers need technical knowledge to increase skills and at the same time preserve existing businesses. Communities and businesses need incentives to restore degraded landscapes, and they need the capacity to implement integrated agroforestry systems where crops, cattle, and forest are mixed. Second, the transition also requires considerable funds, which farmers need to borrow from someone. But lenders and investors face costs and financial risks in financing the transition to sustainability. There is a need. Governments, public, and private finance institutions need to scale up the availability of tools such as credit guarantees and junior or first loss loans. These are forms of insurance in case the borrower cannot reimburse his loan. The lender is covered for part of his losses, lowering the risk of such an investment. Grants are also needed to support smallholder farmers with training, development, and replanting, as well as monitoring the progress of businesses and communities to stop deforestation. By coordinating appropriate government, financial, and corporate actors, new and environmental partners can trigger a transformational shift in leveraging public funding to unlock and scale up private finance flowing to save forests, restoring landscapes, and transition to smart agriculture. Let's work together to make this global transformation happen.
So let's go back to our regulation that it's about to enter into force next year. And the regulation, as I said, is associated to agriculture. And let's see what is the scope of this regulation. The scope is to tackle deforestation. Deforestation, according to the definition of conversion of forest to agricultural use, whether human-induced or not, and forest degradation. In terms of the conversion of primary forest or naturally regenerating forest into plantation forest or primary forest into planted forest. So it's very important to be aware that forest degradation is a process that very often lead to deforestation because it's very, very difficult to make sure that the impact that was done by degrading those areas could be reversed. So the regulation builds on a previous regulation that was only focusing on timber and on voluntary agreements, making sure that action provided by member states in the European Union and by players are now compulsory. And this is also due to the fact that some of the activities that lead to forest degradation or deforestation are considered legal in some of the countries where those actions occur. And the regulation tries to cover those loopholes. Now, the regulation targets only 7 commodities, which are considered the most important responsible commodities of deforestation. And it's palm oil, soya, wood, cocoa, coffee, cattle, and rubber. We won't go into the details of how this regulation will be implemented because it's very complex, and the implementing rules are actually shaped during this year. But the regulation doesn't come out of the blue. It comes from some legal obligation the European Union has taken at international level, such as, for example, the Paris Agreement on Climate, and at EU level with the Green Deal and the objective of achieving climate neutrality by 2050 or the 2030 EU biodiversity strategy. So the driver of the regulation is to make sure that the EU will, let's say, a little bit responsible for the deforestation that is occurring worldwide and within its boundaries. And make sure that the impact that the EU is actually putting forward around the world will be, let's say, minimized, assessed, and reduced. So the objective is to secure that the placing on the EU market and the export of commodities and products that are produced in the EU and are sold outside the EU will be classified as deforestation free. And by deforestation free, we also include in this definition forest degradation free. Those commodities, as we will see in the next slides, are associated to a number of products. So the European Union will have to try to make sure that action will be targeting a long list of products that are derived by those commodities all around the world, and make sure that when the European people buy products, they don't byproducts that are responsible of those, let's say, forest and biodiversity loss, but also products that are, as I said in the very beginning, make an impact, a negative impact on climate change. Thank you. The regulation also will try to make sure that the players of the regulation, which are the actors, the producer, the trading operator, the distributors, the retailers, will be producing some due diligence, making sure that the products they will try to sell or produce will not be associated with deforestation activities as of the year 2020. There are some reasons why the year 2020 has been chosen and are related to some international commitments. In relation to due diligence, that it seems to be a very complex and vague term, it's actually about making sure that there is a system of traceability and certification that is no longer only on paper, but also using technological innovation, such as geolocalization and artificial intelligence. The countries will be entering into a sort of benchmarking scale and will be classified according to the risk of deforestation and forest degradation from low to high, according to the implementation of technological innovation that will tell us where we have to avoid making more impact, and also how we can introduce risk mitigation measures that could be effective. Very, very quickly, I just want to show you the list of products that are associated to the commodities that will be actually the players of this regulation. So as you can see, for example, in the case of cattle, one of the 7 commodities, the regulation describes all the products that will have to enter into the mechanism of the regulation. So live animals, but specific products derived from the live animals, including meat, but also including leather, and other specific products. Cocoa, we are talking about the beans, but also butter, powder, shells, coffee, roasted or decaffeinated, and soya, beans again, and other derived products. So palm oil used at for, let's say, food consumption, but also for industrial uses. Rubber, again, many different articles. So the complexity and the very comprehensive nature of this regulation will have a horizontal implementation that will tackle a lot of other different policies in the EU, in the, let's say, internal approach and the approach towards other countries. So including, for example, the partnership agreement that we have with different countries, as we have just heard from other speakers, Vietnam and Ghana, for example. Now, where we are today, the Commission, together with the member states, are putting together let's say, the mechanic of the implementation of this regulation. And the regulation will apply to large companies as of 1st January next year, and as of June next year to small and medium companies. There's been some resistance, as often happen when big things need to be put in place. In March this year, a number of countries have suggested to postpone the implementation of the regulation, but as we all know, regulation has been adopted through a democratic process jointly by the European Parliament and the Council. So implementation and cut-off dates cannot be changed at this stage. The member states will have to translate a number of obligations in their national legislation, including certain sanction system, which maybe are stricter than in the past, like, for example, fines up to 4% of total EU-wide turnover, temporary exclusion from public procurement processes, and access to public funding in case of very severe violation of the regulation that, I want to repeat again, is not yet enforced, because it will be enforced next year. So, so I finished here, and I thank you very much for your interest on this issue. And thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. And we're now ready to begin our discussion, which will be led by Livia Amidania Liberti, the founder of the Agriculture. Please, Livia, the floor is yours.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. And can you see me? No.
Not yet.
Sorry. Let me start. There I am. Okay.
Yeah, we can see you now. Yes.
I have a bit of a cold myself, so apologies. Thank you for the invitation. Gave me the opportunity to listen to research and on these complicated issues that are transversal to a lot of industries. I have a few questions, but I would like first to ask some questions that we received online. Before this, I'm going to say I am not going to buy tea or chocolate like before ever again, because I'm now a bit more aware of the value chains behind, of the complexity, and of the threats to social environment and governance. So thank you all for sharing your research. I'm going to start from a question from Bettina Rudloff, if I'm misspelling it, and it's for Ralph. The first question is, what tools in Ghana are specifically used for preparing, let's say, traceability? And in your view, what is missing? How would you assess the risks of for the small farmers to be excluded from the value chain? That's the first question.
Right. Ralph? So can I go on? Can I go on?
Yeah, go.
All right, great. All right, thanks for the question. So the tools that are now being used for this traceability, preparing for traceability in Ghana, really has to do with mapping GPS locations of or deforestation-free cocoa plots, and this is being done currently with support by the EU. So they follow a step where they say they need to have evidence of traceable, deforestation-free and legal cocoa that is being processed, that is being produced. Then they also assess the risks of non-compliance. And if the risks are identified, they take steps to mitigate them. So there's a three-step due diligence process that they take. And this is based on a benchmarking system that would categorize the areas according to the deforestation risk. So, for example, if the area or the product, the cocoa bean is coming from a low-risk area, then you follow a simple due diligence of collecting evidence that the product is traceable, deforestation-free, and legal. If it is from a standard risk area, then you follow the full three-step due diligence process. From a high-risk area, you still go ahead and follow the three the full 3-step due diligence process. Let me say that when they map the GPS location of deforestation-free cocoa plots, they go ahead to deliver the deforestation-free cocoa to the first buyers, where it is kept segregated. And like I showed you in the value chain figure, the quality control unit of the Ghana Cocoa Board plays a role every step of the way, and they have empowered the license buying companies to do some type of first screening. When your question about what is missed, I think I don't know how widespread that is at the moment, whether they've carried it out throughout the country or they are just piloting it somewhere and seeing how it would fare. So I cannot report on the degree of spread at the moment. You ask a question, how would assess the risk of small farmers possibly to be excluded from the value chain? The cocoa board structure at the moment has cocoa sheds in most of the cocoa growing areas. So there are many cocoa sheds that are central to the growing, to cocoa farms. So what happens is that when the beans are dried and ready, the farmers take them to the cocoa shed, and there are purchasing clerks there certified by the license buying companies who buy the cocoa from the cocoa farmers, make sure that they met the standards. Sometimes there's a CHED cocoa health and extension that to each farm to inspect sure that they are complying with the regulations, etc. So they come in addition to the officers of the license buying companies to ensure that they're actually meeting the requirements. Since cocoa is bought by the government through the license buying companies, most cocoa farmers would have to find their way to the the cocoa sheds, and then sell to the purchasing clerks, who later would sell to the government. So there's actually very little that I can report on anyone getting missing in there or being excluded when it comes to the value chain. Some clerks actually have been able to build a very good relationship with the farmers over time. And so there's a term that they have for them called cocoa cratchit, like the cocoa gentleman, who they build trust with over time. And so they know what is going on at what time. And I wouldn't say that they would exclude any form of anomalies, but at least as much as it depends on the license buying companies, they have to make sure that they meet all the standards. Otherwise, then at quality control, their produce may be rejected. You ask also how I would evaluate the living income differential and what is the recent status of implementation. Now, the living income differential is a $400 premium per ton on cocoa that is produced, and this is supposed to go straight to the farmers, straight to the cocoa farmers. Now, what Ghana has purpose to do really is, whenever cocoa prices are high on the world market, whatever comes in as extra is put in a certain fund, which then goes to shore up cocoa prices when they are low on the world market. The living income differential also is in the calculation of the price that the government will pay for the cocoa. They factor it in so that it will go straight to the farmer. Because my conversation with Cocoa Board shows that they do not have any interest in taking it. As to whether it is going is something that I may not be able to report on at the moment. You ask if I see the risk of irritating market, corruption, incentives, etc. I won't rule them out, but because these things happen on a high level, and they trickle down to the smallest cocoa farmer. But I do not have any evidence to show that there's actually corruption at the top when it comes to living income differential. What I can say is that there is still an issue with what we are calling a living income, right? And if, for example, cocoa farmers are getting, let's say, 5 to 7% of the price of a chocolate bar, then we need to do better when it comes to paying the right price for sustainable cocoa. That's what I can say for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you for questions and answers. Is there any question from the floor?
Do you have any questions, or do you want to share your ideas?
Yes, yes. Please go ahead. Please. Please participate.
It's not a specific question, I guess.
Speak up.
Maybe I can bring it to my because they can hear you otherwise. I can say it's only that the fact about UN. I'm saying that they're doing like diminish.
I didn't understand, sorry.
Yeah, no, I don't know if you can. Yeah, also because they cannot hear the microphone. But there are people online cannot hear you.
Well, actually, it's not a question. I was just wanted to say that I feel that all of this is kind of interesting, especially the thing that you said. I was specifically interested about what the UE is trying to do about the deforestation, because most of it is not happening in UE, and so it's really interesting to understand the regulation that they're trying to do, and you kindly explained that. And I was just curious about, in general, you explained what they're looking forward to do. I think I got lost in what is actually happening in about all the UE, like what they're actually trying to do right now about all of this, and especially thinking about the Amazon in general and all of this, because I know that the main reason about the Amazon deforestation, it's, as you said, agriculture, and well, in Brazil, it's agricultural, it's related to soy. Well, soy is not, the Brazilian soy is not sell to Europe, it's mostly sell to like China, I would think. So I guess like Europe is not directly in these terms, but thinking about a bigger view, I can feel like they have a lot to do and to offer. So I was just really curious about this topic in general. Yeah.
Thank you.
How would you like to go on and maybe incorporate one of Bettina's questions? I guess it's number 2.
Okay.
If you think it's appropriate.
Yes. Okay. So maybe I go first, and then Ileana, if you want to say something. So about the sorry, I'm just trying to position the video camera correctly. So about the deforestation regulation, it's about trying to cover double standards. So on one side, we have some laws in the European Union that protect some sensitive areas, biodiversity, not always successfully, but let's say we try to do that. But on the other side, then we allow our trader, our producer, our companies to go to third countries and do something different. Now, what you were saying about soy is not, let's say it's correct in what you were saying, but actually you have to think also of biofuel. So that also is used in Europe. So yes, there is a direct use of Brazilian soy in the European Union. And also you have to think about feed. So this is trying to cover this gap, and also in terms of maybe the economic side, because obviously it's something very costly for the players in third countries. the regulation tried to introduce innovative methodologies, artificial intelligence, and innovation in trying to see where those problems are occurring, and where is it necessary not to further expand agriculture uses of any source, because as we have seen, it's about agriculture, but it's about also livestock, and it's about using the products that are derived in different ways, such as soy, for example. So definitely there are also some impact on trade agreements, but the European Union is also trying to introduce the sustainability chapter in all the new trade agreements, and try to review the old trade agreements which they don't have a sustainability chapter, and try to introduce it, like it's now happening with Ghana, for example. So thank you. Would you like to add something? Okay.
Not in this matter. Also because deforestation, just a very brief news, but from the analysis of literature, actually, for example, for the tea value chain, deforestation is not, let's say, affecting the sector itself, and actually all the let's say agroforestry project that are implemented now in Vietnam covers actually the tea sector. So it's a sector that taking these into consideration, even though agriculture in general in Vietnam is not so concerned, let's say, about deforestation. So just a very brief comment.
Thank you. We have a few more questions from Bettina to Gaia. Feel free, Bettina, to ask the questions yourself in the interest of time, if you can. Otherwise, I'll step in.
Yes, hello. Thank you very much. My akku is maybe limited. I will very quick. So Bettina Rottloff from the German Institute of International Security Affairs, and I work since long on, especially now, on the parallelism of unilaterals and FTAs. And my question to Gaia was more on the unilateral part, so the UDR. Do you look at partnership approaches? Because one politically very sensible issue is the process that they are unilaterally defined, meaning that a lot of trade partners feel being, how to say, a bit dominated, let's say, by this decision, whereas in negotiations of an FTA, they are part of a negotiation process, and they are not so much when deciding the UDR. So, but however, there are in principle some options for supporting partnerships to implement them. Do you look at that, and where do you see options, for instance, on mutual recognition approaches for certificates? That's one issue. And I would like to stress maybe as well, again, another driver, which is actually the FTA, because there you talked about the TSD chapters. Yes, they are part in each and any FTA now newly of the EU, but they are hardly enforceable or only in a very limited way. And that was a political or regulatory incentives as well to find another way to enforce sustainability. It's of course much easier to do that with these unilateral measures. However, they somehow cause political problems and maybe as well economic problems with trade partners, thinking about leakage effects, so to deviate the trade. So question is, do you consider these more strategic issues on the parallel thing, and how to improve partnership in the UDR? Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. So first of all, I don't decide anything myself, so I can just, we can just discuss about what has been decided at European Union level. But let's say that I think it's the general consideration is that we cannot keep continuing talking about biodiversity crisis and climate crisis as an abstract concept. We have to make action, and we know that deforestation, as I said in the very beginning, is the key component of leading to both crises and the major contributor. So we have to try to solve that, and this is why this regulation steps in. And it doesn't come, out of the blue, because it had a lot of discussion, a lot of stakeholder partnership forum have been organized by the European Commission and the member states, including all the different partners all around the world. And that is something that I agree with you. It has to be a key component for the future, because we can only be successful if there is cooperation among all the parties. But I think that the first key message is we have to transpose we have to make sure, we have to make sure that instruments are put into action in order to solve the problem of biodiversity and climate change. Otherwise, we will always talk about this, and we won't solve anything at all. So on the other side, obviously, I guess the European Union probably will have to identify a funding mechanism in order to help all these countries that are will have to be engaged into update their supply chain and make sure that trainings and funding and that those funding will be directed not only to companies or trade players, but to small players like the small farmers, which are, for example, for the case of Ghana, more than 1 million people. So I understand it is going to be very challenging and difficult. Probably, I don't expect this regulation to be functioning from day one. Maybe it will take years, but let's say it's a step forward compared to the past, where there were only some voluntary agreements to do some very good due diligence and good statement, but little action that can be proven with facts, with data, and maybe through technology that we know we have and that we can use. I hope this helped.
Thank you, Gaia. There's a final question for Ralph, and another couple of questions from Bettina. May I kindly suggest, Bettina, that you email Gaia directly on these two issues? We're running a tad late. Is that okay?
It's
Excellent,
okay.
I
just copied some hints on maybe interesting reports, so
perfect,
that could be
thank
interesting for others as well. So no. I
you.
don't want to dominate like with the UDR.
No, it's okay.
Thank you.
So we have a question for Ralph, and then I have a question myself, which I will pose now, but I will give Ralph priority to reply. We need to close by 12:05. So my question for all of you, really, Gaia, I think you've already partially answered. This is a very complex value chain that spans through industries, countries, geopolitical issues, a lot of stakeholders. In your opinion, which is the weakest link? And this is for the three researchers. But I give the floor to Ralph first. I'm sure you can see the question in the chat.
Yes. Yeah, I
Okay.
can see Raphael's question. I didn't hear the last part of your question, but I'll go on with answering Raphael's, and then maybe you can put yours out again. Whether I think we should limit COCOBOT's role in moving and moving to a more open cocoa sector. I think that there are pros and cons to whatever pricing regime any country operates. As we speak now, the CCC of Côte d'Ivoire operates a different regime, and they also have their own challenges to it. I think we can think, we can begin to think more of a hybridized system of the two. But more importantly, we should begin to discuss or to get involved in the conversation of decommodifying cocoa, which is just to decouple cocoa price from the commodity exchange market and probably move to fully setting the price of cocoa. I mean, cocoa producing countries fully setting the price of cocoa based on the cost of production, including what is required to provide a living income. I think that if we do not think about these things, then we are just going to be moving in circles. We need to begin conversations in that regard, set prices that are relevant and dependent on the costs that farmers are incurring to produce this cocoa, rather than just putting them on the commodity exchange markets for the highest bidder. Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph. So my question is, going back to what you said, with the risk of going back in circles, right? So these are industries that are interconnected. The links between the Vietnam, Ghana, and the European regulation is obvious. So because of the complexity of the system and then of complexity of the geopolitical and economic and environmental, social issues, what do you think? Where should all the players not fail? I mean, what is the key to success? If you have to say one thing, and we have 1 minute per researcher. Thank you.
Okay. To say one thing, I would say get around the table and talk, communicate the disadvantages, communicate the advantages, come to a preferable conclusion of what is going to help your respective country. That is what I would say.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree with Ralph, because of course also for Vietnam we are analyzing the let's say the interviews, so the primary data that we collected. That's why our study, my presentation, was of preliminary data, because we are analyzing the response of farmers and stakeholders of the sector, and but already now we can say that the only thing that should be done for sure is to give attention to the needs of the very first stakeholder of the value chain, so the producers. So sitting at the table and saying, okay, what's your need? What you need to do to improve your position? Because otherwise the power will be like always by just one side and not for both.
Thank you, Ilenia. Gaia?
Yes, I think sitting at the table is obviously most important thing, but also with clear data. So have a clear picture of the situation and the forecast of the imminent future, because here we're talking about facing unprecedented crises that are destroying the availability of resources for everybody, not only for us in the European Union. So I would say have a clear know-how when sitting on the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lenia, Ralph, and Gaia. Your research is incredibly informative. We just finished on time. Spot on. Thank you for all your questions and for your insights. And I'm leaving the floor to Anastasia again. Thank you all. It's been an honor to be here today.
Thank you, Livia, for guiding us through this discussion. And now let's move on into our final session of the day on sustainability and trade agreements. And Federica De Maria from CREA will now present her findings on these topics, helping us to better understand how sustainability can be assessed and applied into international markets. Please, Federica, the floor is yours, and I will now show your presentation.
So, just to say some small word about the my presentation. The focus is on the regulation in terms of maximum residual level of pesticide and antibiotics, and this is sensitive issues because we are trying to measure the heterogeneity in terms of distance measure and the way in which countries are regulating pesticide and regulation and antibiotics. So this is the outline of my presentation. Just few words about EU policies and the framework of EU policies on pesticide and antibiotics in the context of Green Deal and farm to fork strategies. Then I'll present our indicator, which aim is to capture the differences in regulation in terms of maximum residual level of pesticide and antibiotics, and the results and conclusion. So this table is summarizing the SDGs most directly associated with sanitary and phytosanitary measures, and this is really important because pesticide and antibiotics are playing a crucial role in food production. Indeed, their misuse pose significant challenges to economic, social, and environmental sustainability. Let's thinking about food contamination or water contamination, for example. So when we think about the differences in standard or the differences in the management of sanitary and phytosanitary measures, we associated and we talk about SDG 6, clean and water sanitation, or climate action, or decent work, and also a partnership for goal SDG 17. So the European Green Deal and the Farm to Fork strategy established an ambitious goal, which is to build a more sustainable and healthier food system. However, implementing these strategies pose significant impacts on the one hand on the EU competitiveness for the producers, on the other hand in terms of international trade in food, particularly because the farm to fork strategies, the scope of the farm to fork strategies is to reduce the risk of chemical pesticide by 15% by 2030, nutrient loss and fertilizer, even if with a different percentage, and sales of antimicrobials should be also reduced by 50% by 2030. So food or feed export currently to the EU cannot contain pesticide or antibiotics residues that exceed the maximum residual level decided by the EU Commission, and on the basis of the risk assessment to consumer health by the European Food Safety Authorities. This slide is just focusing on the framework or legislative framework in pesticide. In terms of pesticide, we have two regulation. The first one is 1107/29, which established the framework for placing active substances and plant production product on the EU market. Therefore, active substances can only be approved if they comply with hazard and risk assessment criteria. While the regulation 396/25 controls pesticide residues and established the framework for setting maximum residual level in food and feed. So the key aim of this regulation was to support intra-EU trade and establishing an harmonized maximum residual level among member states. What is important is that, and we have to keep in mind that the maximum residual level define MRL as the upper level of a concentration for a pesticide residues in food or feed, and they to be based on good agriculture practices and the lowest consumers exposures necessary to protect vulnerable consumers. However, what is important is that maximum residual level currently in terms of pesticide are established solely on health ground, that is to protect vulnerable consumers and do not consider environmental risk. And by the end of 2008, maximum residual level were established for 560 substances of pesticide, and while 240 substances are not approved for a huge range of agricultural products. While the core of the antibiotic legislative framework are three regulations, 2019-6, which established a packages of rules for the sale, manufacture, import, export, supply, distribution, and control and use of veterinary medicinal products. While the scope of the other regulation, the second regulation, is to complete a prohibition on the use of antimicrobial veterinary medicine for prophylactic treatment, while the core of the last one regulation is the Article 107.1, which introduces a general principle that antimicrobials cannot be used routinely or to compensate for poor husbandry. So why pesticide standard differs? The ambition of the goal of the EU is to transmit its own standard in the exporting countries, but it depends on how the cost of compliance is and the importance of the EU as an exporter market for this specific product. Standards so differ because countries may interpret the science differently, or because they have a different risk management approach, or because they different exposure to a specific risk or different risk preferences. And research are trying to measure the harmonization of sanitary and phytosanitary measure or the reciprocity of standard, in particular by comparing the regulation in terms of maximum residual level of pesticide or other policies that are directly correlated with non-tariff measure. And several indicators have been used in the literature to measure the impact of standard on trade. So by following this kind of literature, we build up a kind of similar indicator, a similar distance. I mean, I'm referring to, for example, the Euclidean distance, Euclidean distance, or the Canberra distance, and in this case, we provide the measure of the heterogeneity of severity index, which range between -1 and +1. An index equal 0 is mean that the EU is regulating, the EU and the other countries share the same regulation, while an index lesser than 0 is indicating that the exporting countries has a less stringent regulation, and more than zero is the EU. The EU is applying the stricter regulation. So these are the results. What we done, we use this indicator both in the analysis of pesticide and antibiotic regulation, but the differences between antibiotic, our index is that in the case of pesticide, we try to consider the level of toxicity that until now was skipped by the other the researcher that are considering the heterogeneity in SPS measures. So this graph is referring to the heterogeneity in countries and distance for pesticide classified as high toxic substances. Our benchmark is the EU in yellow color, and as you can see, there is a certain degree of heterogeneity. Indeed, the northern US countries, the North American countries, and Russia and China currently share the same regulation of the EU or the stricter, stringent standard in comparison to those the EU. While, for example, India or Vietnam or Thailand and also Gulf Cooperation Council are applying a more less stringent regulation in pesticide for high toxicity substances. The same exercise was done in the case of slightly substances, and in this case, even a certain degree of heterogeneity is evident. The most marked difference were observed for the countries of South America or India, Thailand, and Vietnam, Laos, for example. So this is really important because this kind of comparison is saying that it's important to take into consideration the level of toxicity in computing the similarity or dissimilarity measures. The same exercise, we replicate this exercise for antibiotics regulation, and this is a general map which takes into consideration all product mix, and as we can see, countries showing a very different regulation or on antibiotic are Australia, North American countries, while those with a similar regulation are South Africa, Mexico, or Brazil, for example. And we go through specific meat product, and even in this case, in the case of Turkey, a certain degree of heterogeneity emerge. So North American country are applying a very different regulation, and the management of the antibiotics are really different, and in comparison to those of that one of the EU countries, and the same for example, Australia, while China and Russia and Tunisia share the same regulation or a regulation more similar to the EU countries. And as you can see from the map, the color of our countries change, and this is important for us because this kind of exercise highlighting that there is a dissimilar way in regulating active substances. So this is the last map for chicken meat, and even in this case we can say that Mexico, Russia and China share the same regulation of the EU, while India and Canada or Australia are managing in different way the antibiotics in the meat production. So, what are the conclusion of our studies? First of all, heterogeneity emerged both in the pesticide and antibiotics analysis, and the results are showing that in the following years it will be crucial for discussion tables on SPS measures to focus on the substances that are considered moderately or slightly toxic, even because as the map shown, for the substances classified are highly toxic, there are a certain degree of alignment between the EU and the rest of the world. This heterogeneity could be considered as a barrier to trade, and of course, if the scope of the UDM of EU is try to harmonize the standard, this kind of harmonization could stimulate export and increase food safety. And the ongoing liberalization process through free trade agreement should facilitate the compliance between standards. And the last important thing is that the application of stringent standard also requires several actions, such as technical assistance for the adaptation of farms to hygienic sanitary standards and the correct use of antibiotics, as well as adequate surveillance and control structure. What is the further step of our analysis is that one of estimating the gravity model and try to put the beta regression analysis, the beta of our SPS of the measure in the general or partial equilibrium model, and try to assess the welfare effect that accounts for market failures, and simulate also the effect of a ban on pesticide in high toxicity class on agriculture trend, verified what's happened in the relation in the international trade relation between EU and the rest of the world. So that's all from my side, and thank you for your attention. I hope to be in time.
Thank you, Federica, for sharing with us the results of your research. And now we will move to the final discussion, which will be conducted by Łukasz Woźniacki, Senior Trade and Anti-Counterfeit Manager at CropLife Europe. Łukasz, are you online?
Yes, I'm online. Do you hear me well?
Yes. Yeah. Please take to the stage. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Great. Oh, sorry. Thank you very much for the presentation. Very interesting findings. I noted some questions for you. Maybe if you could answer, that would be great. I think for the discussion. You noted that the role of harmonization. What role would you see for international bodies, international fora for this task? And if you have been already analyzing what the international bodies, international fora have been doing in this regard, are they fulfilling their goals, or do you see there has to be some changes in the functioning of this of those international bodies?
Okay. So the problem in terms what I see, the problem in terms of codex is that the codex currently is regulating more just a few substances, and this could be a problem indeed when if I think at the data we analyze, we compare, I don't know, in the case of European Union, more than 1,000 of substances in comparison to those one of the codex. So maybe an effort in this sense makes sense. And yes, we are thinking about other trade direction. This is just the first analysis on the degree of harmonization, and of course we are really interested in the recent debate, and particularly as after the rejection of the new regulation on pesticide by the European Parliament. Of course, this is a kind of exercise, and we need time for analyzing in more detail the question you posed.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question I have regarding, you made a reference to Green Deal and farm to fork policies. And one of the proposals, and actually that has been already implemented by the European Commission, is idea of including environmental considerations when setting up MRLs. So this was already at the first regulation came into force. So this is a little bit going beyond looking into food safety, right? So I was wondering if you look into that, and also if the MRLs are the right tool to address those concerns. What's the implications for the whole system of global, which MRLs are being a global standard, and only EU for the moment is trying to incorporate those environmental considerations, but probably it will only start the discussion. So the question for you, what do you think about this move from the EU? How do you see connecting environmental objectives with by using the MRL system?
Okay. Considering our analysis was the scope of our analysis considering the food safety issues. Of course, we have to explore also the environmental ones, and I don't know if the maximum residual level are the right tool for evaluating the environmental aspect. So I don't know. I have just to think about this.
Okay. Thank you. I also wanted to ask you about the differences in approach between the different countries to MRLs. You mentioned in your presentation the differences in approach to science, and different approach to risk assessment and risk management. Were you also looking into different climatic condition, different pest pressure conditions across the globe? We know that for some country, for Europe, for example, some diseases or pests are not occurring, and therefore some pesticides are not needed. Whereas, let's say in Brazil or generally in South America, there are different pests, there are different diseases, and there are different pesticides needed. Did you also look into that?
Yes, when we analyze the regulation, in particular that one of South Africa, for example, we go through analyzing this kind of aspect, even because when we looked at the results, we see that South African countries currently are managing in a better way in comparison to the other, the antibiotics problem or also the pesticide. And this is because these countries are a different approach in terms of risk assessment, for example, in the case of BSI, or in the terms of climate condition, because, for example, they are also applying some rules in terms of new breeding techniques for solving the problem of climate change. So, yes. I don't know if I...
Yeah, you answered. Thank you very much. I see already questions in the chat, so maybe we can also go into those questions. There's one about FTA and sustainability, but the issue is that these chapters so far are not really enforceable. Some limited exceptions with New Zealand and Kenya. So even if there is TSD and the EU cannot enforce in the way it can with EUDR, EU CSD, DD, and several other unilaterals.
So thanks to Bettina for her comment, and yes, you are right, there is a kind of criticism at WTO level, and there are also some interesting papers in discussion at the OECD tables, so we are trying to have a comprehensive point of view, and of course these are interesting thing that we should consider in our analysis also for the future. Thank you for your questions.
And I see there are more questions, and one of them was already answered. I had similar question, but maybe you could answer this one as well. Where do you see the best forum to address harmonization, WTO or Codex, and how to overcome recent blockages in multilateral cooperation? Any incentives to stress?
Sorry, I don't see the issue, the question.
Do you want me to repeat the question for you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So where do you see the best forum to address harmonization, WTO or Codex, WTO Codex, and how to overcome recent blockages in multilateral cooperation? Any incentive to stress?
I think that the best way is the cooperation between these two bodies. Yeah, the round table indeed between WTO and Codex, I think are the best option to discuss and try to manage this sensitive issue, because the harmonization currently is a very huge topic. Yeah.
Thank you. And also another question, do you consider to evaluate as well the other trade direction? Example, limiting exports from the EU for pesticides not approved in the EU, as recently debated. This is so far seldom approach in the EU and often limited to very special good weapons, and often criticized as limiting importing countries' sovereignty to decide themselves.
Yes, of course. This is just a preliminary study. These are preliminary results, but we are trying to produce a lot of work and a lot of paper in these topics. So we go further in studying and address these issues, of course, with exploring some trade differentiation of export. Yes, and yeah.
Thank you. And the next question is also referring to an issue that I raised before, is the environmental factor and environmental considerations. There is criticism at WTO, example by the US, on that as pursued by the EU on neonics. So this is the first environmental factor regulation. Maybe interesting to look at the arguments there. Yeah. Maybe I will extend. I understand. I think there were 19 countries that were commenting on this measure by the EU, as from US, China, Australia, South Africa, Brazil, I think Argentina, Canada as well. So a really a big group of countries that were raising concerns on this approach.
Yes, of course. Indeed, I think that I answered.
Yes. Yeah. 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 It was just a comment.
Yeah. Yeah. Noted. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. So, are there any other questions?
Questions or comments? I'm just asking to the person here, hearing person. do you want to share with us your ideas on the topics we presented? Yep. No more questions.
Okay.
Thank you so much for helping us to guide this discussion, Lucas. And
thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you. And before we close this event, I would like to take a moment to thank our speakers and our discussants for their valuable contributions, and also our audience for their participation throughout the day. I would also like to thank again Lumsa University for hosting this event, and Professor Perry for his contribution to the project as member of the advisory board. I hope this workshop has provided us with new insights and inspiration, and thank you once again for joining us.
Bye.